The massive alien ship moved through space like a dark mountain floating between the stars. Its hull stretched for miles, covered in strange symbols that glowed with cold blue light. Inside the ship, Ambassador Zix Thala stood before a wall of screens showing Earth spinning slowly in the distance. The crystalline being's body caught the light from the displays and threw it back in sharp rainbows across the metal walls. Zix Thala had done this many times before. Hundreds of worlds had received the same message, and hundreds of worlds had submitted to the Galactic Council's demands. Some tried to fight back with their primitive weapons, but they all fell in the end. The Council's power was absolute, and resistance was futile. The ambassador touched the control panel with one of its many jointed fingers. The communication system came alive, ready to send the standard message to the small blue planet ahead. Earth would join the Council's empire, just like all the others. Its people would work in the mines and factories of distant worlds. Its resources would feed the Council's endless hunger for expansion. On Earth, President Helen Martinez sat in the White House Situation Room, surrounded by her closest advisors. The room was quiet, except for the soft hum of computers and the nervous breathing of the people around the long table. Admiral Jake Sullivan, a tall man with gray hair and steel blue eyes, checked his watch for the third time in 5 minutes. Dr. Lisa Chun, the brilliant physicist who led humanity's most secret project, stared at her tablet screen without really seeing it. The large screen at the front of the room suddenly flickered to life. The image of Zix Thala appeared, its crystalline form towering over them, even through the video connection. When it spoke, its voice was like breaking glass, mixed with the sound of wind through empty spaces. Greetings, primitive inhabitants of the third planet. I am Ambassador Zix Thala of the Hegemony Council. Your world has been selected for incorporation into our glorious empire. You will comply with the following demands within 72 of your standard hours. The alien's words filled the room like poison. First, you will surrender 40% of all your natural resources to Council management. Second, 30% of your population will be relocated to work sites throughout Council space. Third, your military forces will be disbanded and your weapons destroyed. Fourth, a Council governor will be installed to oversee your integration into our empire. President Martinez felt her hands clench into fists under the table. Around her, she could see the faces of her advisors growing pale. General Robert Hayes, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, looked like he wanted to punch something. Secretary of State Carol Williams closed her eyes as if trying to make the nightmare disappear. Zix Thala continued without emotion. Compliance is not optional. We have destroyed 17 worlds that chose resistance. Their populations are extinct, and their planets are now mining colonies. You have seen the evidence of our power through your long-range sensors. The choice is yours, but choose wisely. The transmission ended, leaving the room in dead silence. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then voices erupted from around the table, all talking at once. Some demanded immediate surrender. Others called for evacuation of major cities. A few suggested trying to negotiate for better terms. Admiral Sullivan slammed his hand on the table, and the room fell quiet. We all knew this day might come, he said in his gravelly voice. The question is, what are we going to do about it? Secretary Williams leaned forward. Jake, we've seen what they can do. 17 worlds completely destroyed. We can't fight something like that. Dr. Chun looked up from her tablet. Actually, we might be able to. All eyes turned to the young physicist. She had been working on something called Project Defiance for the past 5 years, but most of the people in the room didn't know the details. It was classified above their level, known only to the President, Admiral Sullivan, and a handful of others. Lisa, President Martinez said carefully, Are you saying what I think you're saying? Dr. Chun nodded. The quantum fold drives are ready. We've tested them successfully on unmanned craft. The weapon systems are installed and functional. The crews have been training in secret for 2 years. General Hayes frowned. What quantum fold drives? What crews? What are you people talking about? Admiral Sullivan stood up and walked to another screen on the wall. He entered a code, and the display came alive with images that made everyone in the room gasp. Spaceships, hundreds of them, sleek and deadly looking, hidden in construction facilities on the dark side of the moon. We've been preparing for this possibility ever since we detected the first Council transmissions 15 years ago, Sullivan explained. While they were watching us through conventional telescopes, we were building a fleet using technology they've never encountered. The ships on the screen looked nothing like the massive alien vessel they had just seen. They were smaller, faster, built for speed and maneuverability rather than raw firepower. Their hulls were painted matte black to blend with space, and their designs seemed to flow like water frozen in metal. Chun stood up and pointed to technical diagrams that appeared next to the ship images. The Council builds big, slow dreadnoughts, because that's how they've always fought. Ship-to-ship combat in straight lines, like naval battles from old Earth history. But we've taken a different approach. She touched the screen, and the display zoomed in on one of the ships. These vessels use quantum fold technology to appear anywhere in a solar system instantly. They can strike and disappear before the enemy knows what hit them. Their weapons are designed for precision rather than destruction. We can disable enemy ships without killing their crews. President Martinez stared at the images. How many ships do we have? 847. Combat vessels, Admiral Sullivan replied, plus support craft, medical ships, and mobile construction facilities. The flagship is called the USS Liberty. Secretary Williams shook her head. This is insane. Even if these ships work as advertised, we're talking about fighting an empire. That spans thousands of worlds. They have resources we can't even imagine. But they've never fought humans before, Dr. Chun said quietly. They've conquered races that think like they do, fight like they do. We're different. Admiral Sullivan turned back to face the room. The alien ambassador was right about one thing. We have a choice to make. We can surrender and watch our children grow up as slaves in alien minds, or we can fight back and show the galaxy that humanity doesn't kneel to anyone. President Martinez looked around the table at each face. Some showed fear, others determination. A few looked like they were still trying to process what they had just learned. Finally, her gaze settled on Admiral Sullivan. Jake, in your professional opinion, do we have a chance? The old admiral was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Madam President, they're about to learn why humans spent thousands of years fighting each other. We got very, very good at it. President Martinez stood up, and everyone else in the room followed. She walked to a secure communication panel and placed her hand on the scanner. The device beeped, confirming her identity. Admiral Sullivan, she said formally, I hereby authorize the implementation of Protocol 7. May God help us all. Sullivan saluted sharply. Understood, Madam President. Beginning fleet activation immediately. As alarms began to sound throughout the building, President Martinez looked up at the ceiling as if she could see through it to the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, an alien empire was waiting for humanity's surrender. They were about to get a very different answer than they expected. The hidden shipyards on the dark side of the moon came alive like a sleeping giant awakening. Admiral Jake Sullivan stood on the bridge of the USS Liberty, watching through the massive viewing windows as hundreds of ships powered up their engines for the first time. Blue flames erupted from their thrusters. casting eerie shadows across the lunar surface. Captain Rick Porter felt his heart racing as he took command of the USS Courage. The former fighter pilot had trained for this moment for 2 years, but seeing it actually happen still felt like a dream. His ship was smaller than a traditional destroyer, built for speed and stealth rather than heavy armor. Every line of its hull was designed to slice through space. Like a knife through water, the communication channels buzzed with activity as ship after ship reported ready status. Lieutenant Amy Walsh, the tactical officer aboard the USS Courage, coordinated with her counterpart Commander Ben Parker on the USS Valor. Their voices were calm and professional, but Porter could hear the excitement underneath. "All ships report ready for deployment," Admiral Sullivan announced over the fleet communication system. "Remember your training. We are not here to destroy the enemy fleet. We are here to show them that humanity cannot be conquered." War Commander. Threx Null of the Council fleet had been expecting the usual response from a newly contacted world. Either immediate surrender or a pathetic attempt at resistance using primitive weapons. What appeared on his sensors made no sense at all. The alien commander was a massive creature, built like a walking tank with 4 arms and skin like metal plates. His species had conquered dozens of worlds through simple, overwhelming force. His ships were each the size of a small city, armed with weapons that could crack continents. "What am I looking at?" Threxnol demanded, as his sensor operator showed him the display. "Unknown, War Commander. We detect several hundred small craft emerging from behind the planet's satellite. They are much smaller than standard warships. Perhaps they are evacuation vessels." Threxnol studied the readings. The human ships were tiny compared to his dreadnoughts. His smallest vessels were 3 times larger than their biggest ones. This would be over quickly. "Signal the human commander," he ordered. "Tell them they have one chance to surrender before we demonstrate our power." But when the communication channel opened, instead of apply for mercy, Threxnol heard something. That surprised him. Human laughter. "This is Admiral Sullivan of the Terran Defense Force," came the voice from the small blue planet. "Your 72 hours are up. Here is our response." The human ships moved like nothing Threxnol had ever seen. Instead of forming the traditional battle lines that every civilized species used, they scattered in all directions. Some disappeared entirely from his sensors, only to reappear somewhere else in the system seconds later. Captain Porter grinned as his ship folded space around itself and materialized directly behind one of the alien dreadnoughts. The massive vessel was turning slowly, trying to bring its weapons to bear on targets that were no longer where they had been moments before. "Amy, target their communication array," Porter ordered. "Remember, we disable, we don't destroy." "Lieutenant." Walsh's hands flew over her control panel. "Locked on, Captain. Firing." The USS Courage's weapons were not the massive energy cannons that most spacefaring civilizations used. Instead, they fired precisely targeted pulses designed to overload specific systems. The alien ship's communication equipment sparked and went dark, but the hull remained intact. All around the system, the same scene played out hundreds of times. Human ships appeared out of nowhere, struck with surgical precision, and vanished before return fire could be targeted. They hit weapon systems, engines, and sensors, leaving the Council ships blind and helpless, but not destroyed. Commander Ben Parker aboard the USS Valor coordinated the attack on the Council's supply convoy. His ship and 5 others materialized. In the middle of the alien formation, moving so fast that the enemy couldn't track them properly. "This is impossible," one of the alien captains transmitted on an open channel. "How are they moving like that?" Dr. Lisa Chun, monitoring the battle from the command center on Earth, smiled as she watched her quantum-fold drives perform exactly as designed. The aliens had never encountered technology They could bend space-time itself. Their ships were built to fight in straight lines, following predictable paths. Human vessels could appear anywhere at any time, but the real surprise came when the human fleet began broadcasting messages on every frequency the Council used. Instead of threats or demands, the transmissions contained something the galaxy had never heard before during a space battle. "Attention, Council Fleet," Admiral Sullivan's voice carried across space. "We do not wish to destroy your ships or harm your crews. We are prepared to accept your surrender and guarantee safe passage back to your home worlds." Threxnol couldn't believe what he was hearing. They want us to surrender? Their ships are smaller than our fighter craft. His tactical officer, a nervous creature with 6 eyes, pointed at the damage reports flooding in from across the fleet. "War Commander, 60% of our vessels have lost primary weapons. 40% have no engines. We cannot fight what we cannot hit." The human ships continued their impossible dance around the Council fleet. They struck with the precision of surgeons, targeting specific systems while leaving life support and crew quarters untouched. It was a kind of warfare that none of the aliens had ever experienced. Captain Porter brought the USS Courage alongside one of the disabled Council ships. Through the viewing port, he could see alien crew members staring out his vessel in confusion. They looked afraid, but not terrified. They were clearly alive and unharmed. "This is Captain Porter of the human vessel Courage," he transmitted directly to the alien ship. "Do you require medical assistance or supplies?" The alien captain who responded sounded bewildered. You are offering to help us? But we came here to conquer your world." "Yes, you did," Porter replied calmly. "But that doesn't mean we want you to die out here. We're sending over medical supplies and emergency power cells." Across the fleet, similar conversations were taking place. Human ships that had just disabled Council vessels were now offering aid to their crews. Food, water, medical supplies, and even entertainment programs were being transmitted to the stranded alien ships. War Commander Threxnol found himself facing a situation that nothing in his military training had prepared him for. His fleet was defeated, but not destroyed. His crews were captured, but not harmed. The humans were treating them better than many Council species treated their own allies. "War Commander," his communication officer reported, "we are receiving transmissions from the human fleet. They are broadcasting our current situation across Council space. On screens throughout the galaxy, beings watched in amazement as the mighty Council fleet sat helpless while tiny human ships tended to their needs like caretakers. Helping children. The humans had won a complete victory without firing a single shot intended to kill. Admiral Sullivan's voice echoed across space once more, but this time his transmission was aimed not just at the Council fleet, but at every world within range of their communication networks. "People of the galaxy," he began, "today you have seen that the Council's power is not absolute. You have seen that resistance is possible. Any world that seeks freedom from tribute and oppression need only ask, and humanity will stand with you." The message spread from world to world, carried by the Council's own communication system. On mining planets and factory worlds, enslaved colonies and tribute stations, billions of beings heard the same incredible news. Someone had stood up to the Council and won. As the battle ended with the complete surrender of the Council fleet, Captain Porter looked out at the stars and wondered. What they had just started. They had won the first battle, but the war for galactic freedom was just beginning. Captain Nancy Woods gripped the arms of her command chair as the USS Freedom slipped through hyperspace like a ghost. Her ship was one of the new stealth vessels, painted black as midnight and equipped with technology that made it nearly invisible to Council sensors. Behind her, 20 more ships followed in perfect silence. The Council's supply route through the Kepler system had been busy for decades. carrying tribute from conquered worlds to the Empire's core systems. Massive cargo vessels moved in predictable patterns, protected by only light escorts. The aliens had never needed heavy protection, because no one had ever dared attack their convoys. "Target acquired," reported Lieutenant Dan Miller from his position. At the tactical station, Council freighter, designation unknown, carrying processed metals from the Kethmer mining colonies. Woods nodded. "Remember, we disable the escorts first. The cargo ship gets boarded, not destroyed. Those metals were stolen from people who mined them as slaves." The human ships materialized around the Council, convoy like sharks emerging from dark water. The alien escorts, small fast vessels with crews of 20 each, found themselves surrounded before they could even raise their shields. Precise energy pulses knocked out their weapons and engines in seconds. The massive freighter tried to run, but Commander Steve Morris, aboard the USS Defiance, was ready for that. His ship had been modified for electronic warfare, bristling with equipment that could hack into alien computer systems. The freighter's engines shut down as Morris and his team took control of its navigation computer. "This is Captain Woods of the Terran Defense Force," she broadcast to the disabled ships. "We are confiscating these stolen goods and returning them to their rightful owners. Your crews will not be harmed if you cooperate." The alien captain of the freighter, a slug-like being with multiple eyes, appeared on the communication screen. His voice bubbled with fear and confusion. "You cannot do this. These goods belong to the Council by right of conquest." "Not anymore," Woods replied. "As of today, theft is no longer profitable in this part of space." Similar scenes played out across dozens of star systems as human strike teams hit Council supply lines with surgical precision. The aliens found their carefully organized empire suddenly disrupted by an enemy that struck everywhere and nowhere, appearing without warning and vanishing before reinforcements could arrive. War Commander Threxnall sat in his command center, aboard the crippled dreadnought Eternal Glory, staring at reports that made no sense. In just 3 days, the humans had attacked 67 different targets across Council space. They moved faster than seemed physically possible, and fought with tactics that violated every principle of civilized warfare. "How many ships do they have?" he demanded of his intelligence officer. The smaller alien, an insect-like creature with too many limbs, clicked nervously. "Unknown, War Commander. Our estimates range from 500 to 5,000. They use the same ship identification codes repeatedly, making accurate counts impossible." Threxnall slammed one of his 4 fists on the console. "They are making fools of us. Every world in Council space is watching our mighty fleet sit helpless while these primitives run wild." What made the situation worse was how the humans treated their prisoners. Instead of the torture and execution that Council forces would have used, the humans provided medical care, good food, and entertainment. Many captured Council soldiers were starting to question why they were fighting at all. Dr. Lisa Chun stood in the command center on Earth, monitoring the quantum fold network that allowed human ships to appear anywhere in the galaxy instantly. Her breakthrough in space-time manipulation had given humanity an advantage that the Council couldn't counter, but she knew it wouldn't last forever. "Admiral Sullivan," she called across the busy room, "we're detecting increased Council fleet movements. They're pulling ships from garrison duty to hunt our strike teams." Sullivan walked over to study her displays. "How long before they adapt to our tactics?" "Maybe weeks, maybe months," Chun replied. "But they will adapt eventually. We need to move to the next phase before they figure out how to counter the quantum fold drives." The next phase was already beginning on distant worlds. Captain Ellen Foster of the USS Constitution had taken her ship deep into Council territory, not to attack military targets, but to make contact with oppressed populations. The Vel-Tar homeworld had been under Council rule for 2 centuries. The reptilian species had once been proud warriors, but generations of servitude had broken their spirit. Their cities were now factories, their people little more than slaves producing goods for their alien masters. Foster's ship materialized in orbit during the planet's night cycle, invisible to the orbital defense platforms. Her landing craft slipped through the atmosphere like falling stars, carrying not weapons, but something far more dangerous to the Council's rule. Citizens of Veltar, Foster's voice echoed across the planet's communication networks. My name is Captain Ellen Foster of the human species. We come offering alliance and freedom. The Veltar had heard rumors of the humans who had defeated a Council fleet, but most had dismissed the stories as impossible dreams. Now they saw proof that resistance was not only possible but successful. Foster met with underground leaders in the ruins of an ancient Veltar temple. The reptilian beings towered over the humans, but their posture spoke of defeat and hopelessness. Their leader, an old warrior named Sekthar, studied the human captain with intelligent golden eyes. Your people are brave, Sekthar said in his hissing voice, but the Council has ruled here for 10 generations. Our young ones do not even remember what freedom looks like. Foster smiled and activated a holographic projector. Images of the recent battle filled the air between them, showing Council ships disabled and helpless, while human vessels darted around them like angry wasps. This is what freedom looks like, she said. Not the absence of enemies, but the courage to stand against them. The effect was immediate. Sekthar's spine straightened, and his eyes blazed with something that had been missing for decades. Around the chamber, other Veltar leaders began to murmur among themselves, their voices carrying a note of hope that had been absent for too long. Within days, the Veltar uprising began. Using tactics learned from human military advisors, they struck at Council facilities with precision and coordination. Their knowledge of their own world's geography gave them advantages that off-world Council troops couldn't match. The same pattern repeated across the galaxy. The aquatic Nephi used their mastery of underwater combat to reclaim their ocean worlds. The insectoid Zephyrians turned their hive mind communication into a weapon against Council surveillance. Species after species rose up, inspired by humanity's example and armed with human-developed strategies. Ambassador Zixthala stood before the High Conclave. The crystalline being's usual composure cracked like ice under pressure. The ruling council of the galaxy's most powerful empire sat in their circular chamber, listening to reports that grew worse by the hour. 17 worlds have declared independence, Zixthala reported. 43 more show signs of unrest. The humans have somehow convinced dozens of species that they can successfully resist our authority. High Counselor Drexmon, a creature of living shadow, spoke in a voice like whispered death. How is this possible? We have ruled for millennia. No species has ever successfully rebelled against our power. The humans fight differently, Zixthala explained. They do not seek to match our strength with strength. Instead, they use speed, deception, and coordination. Worse, they treat defeated enemies with mercy, converting potential revenge into gratitude. Another counselor, this one resembling a floating jellyfish made of light, pulsed with agitation. What do our military advisors recommend? War Commander. Threxnol requests additional fleets, but our garrison forces are already stretched thin, dealing with uprisings. The humans have created chaos across half our territory, with fewer than 1,000 ships. The High Conclave fell silent, contemplating a problem they had never faced before. For the first time in their long history, the Council was fighting not just a military campaign, but a war of ideas. And ideas, they were learning, could be more dangerous than any weapon. On Earth, President Helen Martinez addressed a growing alliance of free worlds via quantum communication. Representatives from dozens of species appeared as holograms around the conference table, their faces showing determination, mixed with amazement at their own courage. "My friends," Martinez began, "what we have started here is bigger than any of us imagine. We are not just fighting for our own freedom, but for the right of all beings to determine their own destiny." The galaxy was changing, and at the center of that change was a small blue planet whose people had refused to kneel. The age of the Council's unopposed rule was ending, and something new was being born among the stars. The rebellion spread through the galaxy like wildfire in a dry forest. Captain Gary Bennett stood on the bridge of the USS Victory, watching as the Kethmer mining colonies erupted in coordinated uprising. The reptilian miners, who had spent generations digging precious metals from their own world for Council tribute, were finally fighting back. Bennett's ship hung in orbit above Kethmer Prime, providing tactical support as the planet's surface blazed with the light of explosions. The Council monitoring stations that had watched over the miners for decades were burning, destroyed by beings who had learned that freedom was worth any risk. "Captain," reported Lieutenant Carol Adams from her communication station, "we're receiving surrender requests from the Council garrison commander. He's asking for safe passage off-world for his forces." Bennett nodded. "Granted. Make sure they understand they're welcome to return if they want to help rebuild instead of oppress." Similar scenes played out across dozens of star systems. The Council's empire, built on fear and overwhelming force, found itself facing something it had never encountered before. The oppressed populations weren't just rebelling. They were winning, using tactics and strategies shared freely by their human allies. On the ocean world of Nephi, the aquatic species had reclaimed their underwater cities from Council occupation forces. Captain Linda Hayes of the USS Constitution watched from orbit as massive sea creatures, domesticated by the Nephi centuries ago, carried alien equipment toward the surface to be destroyed. The Nephi had adapted human submarine warfare tactics to their own environment, turning their entire ocean into a three-dimensional battlefield where Council forces couldn't operate effectively. Their leader, a graceful being named Flo Singer, transmitted his gratitude to the human ship above. "Your people have given us more than military knowledge." Flo Singer's translated voice carried the music of his species' natural communication. "You have given us hope that the strong do not always rule the weak." President Helen Martinez stood before the largest gathering in human history, but most of the beings listening to her weren't human at all. The newly formed Free Worlds Alliance had grown from a desperate human idea into a galaxy-spanning coalition of species, united by a simple belief in self-determination. Representatives from 47 different worlds filled the Great Assembly Hall, their forms ranging from crystalline energy beings to massive creatures that looked like living rocks. What they all shared was the determination to never again bow to the Council's demands. "My friends," Martinez began, her voice carried across space by quantum communication to every world in the Alliance. 6 months ago, most of us had never heard of each other. Today, we stand together as equals, united not by conquest, but by choice. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Voices, clicks, harmonious tones, and sounds that human ears couldn't properly process filled the chamber as dozens of species expressed their agreement. It was chaos, but it was the chaos of freedom rather than the silence of oppression. Admiral Jake Sullivan watched the political celebration from the military command center, but his attention was focused on more immediate concerns. The Council had finally begun to respond to the growing rebellion with serious force. Reports flooded in of massive fleets moving toward Alliance territory, carrying weapons capable of destroying entire planets. "Dr. Chun," Sullivan called across the busy room, "how many ships can we put in space if they come at us with everything they've got?" Dr. Lisa Chun looked up from her calculations, her face showing both pride and worry. "We have 1,200 combat vessels operational, plus about 300 ships contributed by Alliance worlds. The Council is bringing at least 4,000 ships from their core systems. Sullivan nodded grimly. The humans had won every engagement so far through superior tactics and technology, but there came a point where numbers mattered more than cleverness. If the Council was willing to commit their entire military to crushing the rebellion, the Alliance might not survive. War Commander Threxnall studied the holographic display showing the deployment of the Council's Grand Fleet. Every available ship from 50 different worlds was converging on the Alliance territory, the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. The humans had been clever, but cleverness had limits. This time we will not underestimate them, Threxnall announced to his assembled commanders. We will attack all Alliance worlds simultaneously. They cannot be everywhere at once, no matter how fast their ships can move. His tactical officer, the nervous insect being who had learned to fear human unpredictability, raised a claw hesitantly. War Commander, our intelligence reports suggest the humans may have additional capabilities we have not yet encountered. Threxnall's forearms gestured dismissively. What capabilities could they possibly have that we have not already seen? They have shown us their quantum fold drives, their stealth technology, their precision weapons. We have countered all of these with overwhelming numbers. But even as he spoke, Threxnall felt a nagging doubt. The humans had surprised him at every turn, fighting in ways that violated every principle of civilized warfare. What if they had more surprises waiting? Captain Rick Porter stood in a place that should not have existed, surrounded by technology that seemed to bend reality around itself. Deep beneath the surface of Earth's moon, Dia Chun's team had built something that even Porter, veteran of humanity's most secret projects, found difficult to understand. Explain this to me one more time, Porter said, staring at the massive device that filled the underground chamber. In simple terms, Dia Chun smiled, her eyes bright with the excitement of a scientist whose wildest theories had become reality. We call it the Mirror Network. Every Alliance world now has one of these devices, hidden somewhere on or near their planet. They're all connected through quantum entanglement. She gestured to the swirling energy patterns within the device. When the Council attacks any Alliance world, every other world in the network will know instantly. More than that, any ship at any Alliance world can be at any other Alliance world in seconds, regardless of distance. Porter felt his mind struggling to grasp the implications. You're saying we can move our entire fleet from one side of the galaxy to the other instantaneously? Exactly. The Council is planning to attack all Alliance worlds at once, thinking we can't defend them all. But with the Mirror Network, we can be defending all of them simultaneously. The first test came sooner than expected. The Council advance, fleet 200 ships strong, dropped out of hyperspace near the Veltar homeworld, expecting to find it defended by perhaps 20 human vessels. Instead, they found themselves facing over 300 ships from a dozen different Alliance worlds, all arriving within seconds of each other. Sekthar, the old Veltar warrior, who had become a symbol of his people's renaissance, watched from the planet's surface as the combined fleet moved to engage the Council forces. His golden eyes reflected the light of distant explosions as the battle began. The young ones are finally seeing what their ancestors knew, he said to the human military advisor standing beside him. That freedom is not given, it is taken. The battle was brief but decisive. Council forces, expecting to face a handful of defenders, found themselves outnumbered and outmaneuvered by an enemy that seemed to appear from nowhere. Within hours, the surviving Council ships were broadcasting surrender requests, but the real victory wasn't military. As news of the successful defense spread throughout the galaxy, more worlds began declaring independence from Council rule. The Mirror Network allowed instant communication between Alliance worlds, coordinating uprisings across vast distances. Ambassador Zixthala stood once again before the High Conclave. But this time the crystalline being's composure was completely shattered. Cracks ran through its translucent body, reflecting the fractures appearing throughout the Council's empire. 86 worlds have now declared independence, Zix Thala reported in a voice like breaking glass. Our garrison forces are overwhelmed. The Grand Fleet suffered major losses in its first engagement with the Alliance. High Counselor Drexmon's shadowy form writhed with anger. How is this possible? We sent 200 ships against a single world. The humans have developed some form of instantaneous transportation technology. Ships from across Alliance space arrived to defend the Veltar world within seconds. Our forces were outnumbered 3-1. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Council's strategy of simultaneous attacks was worthless if the Alliance could concentrate their forces anywhere instantly. For the first time in millennia, the rulers of the galaxy faced the possibility of genuine defeat. On Earth, President Martinez received a transmission that would change everything. The message came from an unexpected source, broadcast on a council. Military frequency, but carrying a voice that spoke of hope rather than conquest. President Martinez, the transmission began. This is Captain Vextil of the Council ship Redemption. My crew and I wish to defect to the Alliance. We have seen how you treat prisoners and defeated enemies. We want to be part of building something better than what we have served for so long. The message was followed by dozens more, then hundreds. Council soldiers, administrators, even some fleet commanders were abandoning. The artificial world of Hegemon Prime hung in space like a metal moon, its surface covered in towers that reached toward the stars. For 3,000 years, it had been the seat of council power, the place where decisions were made that affected billions of beings across the galaxy. Now it was about to become a battlefield. Admiral Jake Sullivan stood on the bridge of the USS Liberty, watching as the largest fleet in human history gathered around him. Ships from every Alliance world had come to this final confrontation, their hulls bearing the marks of dozens of different civilizations united by a single cause. The Council's remaining forces had retreated to their capital world, nearly 2,000 ships arranged in defensive formations around the planet. It would be the largest space battle in galactic history. But Sullivan knew that the real victory wouldn't be won by weapons. Captain Gary Bennett brought the USS Victory alongside. The flagship, his ship scarred from months of fighting across the galaxy. Through the communication channel, his voice carried the weariness of a warrior who had seen too much death but still believed in the cause he fought for. Admiral, all fleet elements report ready for the final assault. The Council has concentrated everything they have left around Hegemon Prime. Sullivan nodded, but his attention was focused on a smaller ship moving through the Alliance formation. The USS Constitution, carrying Dr. Lisa Chun and a team of human engineers, was heading not for the battle lines, but toward the planet itself. Good luck, Lisa, Sullivan whispered, knowing that the real outcome of this war would be decided not in space, but in the depths of the artificial world below. War-Commander Threxnall stood in the command center of his flagship, the massive dreadnought, final authority, and watched the Alliance fleet approach. Despite everything that had happened, he still couldn't believe it had come to this. The mighty Council Empire, rulers of half the galaxy, making their last stand against an alliance led by primitives from a small blue world. All ships report ready for battle, his tactical officer announced. The defense grid is fully operational. It will have to come through everything we have. Threxnall studied the approaching formation and felt a grudging respect for his enemies. The humans and their allies had fought with courage and intelligence throughout the war, never giving up even when victory seemed impossible. They deserved an honorable defeat. Signal the Alliance fleet, he ordered. Offer them one final chance to surrender. Their rebellion has been brave, But this ends today. The response came not from Admiral Sullivan, but from President Helen Martinez herself, her image appearing on screens throughout both fleets. Behind her stood representatives from every species in the Alliance, a living symbol of what they were, fighting to preserve. War Commander Threxnall, Martinez said, her voice carrying across the void between the opposing forces. We offer you the same chance. Surrender now and help us build something better than what came before. The battle began with the fury of colliding storms. Council ships, massive and heavily armed, traded devastating volleys with Alliance vessels that danced around them like angry insects. The space between the fleets blazed with energy beams and exploding missiles. But both sides had learned from their earlier encounters. Captain Rick Porter led a squadron of human ships in a desperate charge against the Council's outer defensive line. His ship, the USS Courage, had survived every major battle of the war, and he intended to see it through to the end. All ships, execute Pattern 7. Porter commanded as his formation split apart and reformed in a complex weaving pattern. The Council gunners found themselves trying to target ships that seemed to flicker in and out of existence, appearing and disappearing faster than their weapons could track. But while the space battle raged above, the real key to victory was happening. Far below on the surface of Hegemon Prime, Dr. Lisa Chun and her team had infiltrated the planet's core systems, not to destroy them, but to discover something that had been hidden for millennia. I can't believe what I'm seeing, Chun whispered as she stood in a vast underground chamber that stretched beyond the reach of her lights. Gary, you need to see this. Captain Ellen Foster, who had volunteered to lead the ground mission, followed Chun deeper into the artificial world's bowels. What they found there changed everything they thought they knew about the Council and their empire. Buried beneath layers of metal and machinery was soil, real earth that had once supported a living biosphere. Plants, long dead but perfectly preserved, showed what Hegemon Prime had been before the Council transformed it into their capital. It had been a garden world, home to a peaceful species that had been consumed by the empire they later came to rule. The Council didn't build this place, Chun realized. They conquered it, just like everywhere else. Then they buried the evidence of what they destroyed. Foster activated her communication device, broadcasting their discovery to both fleets. Fighting above, all ships, this is the ground team. Hegemon Prime isn't an artificial world. It's a living planet that the Council covered with metal and concrete. The revelation spread through both fleets like wildfire. Council crews who had believed they were defending their rightful capital learned they were actually fighting to preserve a monument to their ancestors' crimes. Many ships simply stopped firing, their crews refusing to continue the battle. High Counselor Drexman's shadowy form writhed with fury as he watched his empire crumble around him. From his command chamber deep within Hegemon Prime, he could see his fleets beginning to surrender or defect to the Alliance. The truth about their world's origins had broken the last bonds of loyalty that held his forces together. Activate the final protocol, he commanded his remaining loyal followers. If we cannot rule the galaxy, then let it burn. But his order never reached its intended targets. Throughout the Council fleet, beings who had served the Empire for their entire lives were making a different choice. Captain Vextil, the first Council officer to defect to the Alliance, led a group of ships in surrounding Drexman's command vessel. High Counselor, Vextil transmitted, your war is over. Surrender now and live to see what we can build together. The space battle ended not with a climactic explosion, but with something far more powerful. Ships that had been trying to destroy each other minutes before were now working together to restore Hegemon Prime to its original state. Alliance engineers and Council technicians labored side by side, stripping away centuries of artificial construction to reveal the living world beneath Dr. Chun stood in what had once been a vast park, watching as Council atmospheric processors worked to restore breathable air to the underground spaces. Overhead, the artificial ceiling was being carefully removed to let in natural sunlight for the first time in 3 millennia. "It's going to take years to fully restore this place," she told President Martinez, who had come down to see the transformation for herself. "But the ecosystem is still here, just sleeping." Martinez nodded, watching as former enemies worked together with a shared purpose. Around her, beings from dozens of species were exploring the hidden wonders of the buried world, marveling at gardens that their ancestors had only heard about in ancient stories. Admiral Sullivan found War Commander Threxnall standing in what had been the Council's main throne room, now stripped of its oppressive decorations to reveal beautiful natural stone beneath. The massive alien warrior looked smaller somehow, as if a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders. "I spent my entire life serving an empire built on lies," Threxnall said without turning around. "We told ourselves we brought order to chaos, civilization to primitives, but all we really brought was death." Sullivan stepped up beside his former enemy and looked out through the transparent wall at the work going on outside. "The past is over. What matters now is what we build for the future." The new galactic government wasn't centered on any single world, but existed wherever beings gathered to make decisions together. Representatives from hundreds of species met in virtual sessions, connected by the quantum communication network that had once coordinated their rebellion. President Martinez stood before the first session of the Galactic Assembly, looking out at faces that represented every form of life the galaxy had produced. Humans sat beside crystalline energy beings, aquatic species shared space with creatures of living rock, and former Council enforcers worked alongside the beings they had once oppressed. "We gather not as conquerors or conquered," Martinez began, "but as equals who choose to work together. The age of empires is over. The age of cooperation has begun." Captain Porter, now Admiral Porter, in the new Galactic Defense Force, trained recruits from dozens of worlds in the principles that had won humanity its freedom. His students included young humans, reformed Council soldiers, and beings from species that had never known anything but servitude. "The greatest weapon we have," he told them as they stood in the restored gardens of Hegemon Prime, "isn't our ships or our technology. It's our belief that every being in the galaxy deserves the chance to choose their own destiny." Ambassador Zix Thyla, now serving as a liaison between former Council worlds and the new government, watched a group of human children playing with young aliens in the garden. Their laughter echoed through spaces that had once heard only the commands of tyrants. "I was wrong about your SP,"